I wound up flying more than my crew after I had been there for quite some time. The commander of the squadron leader, squadron commander, didn't have a crew. And he didn't fly on every mission, but he flew, on a regular basis. And he had to pick his crew members from other crews. And he somehow picked me to be his radio operator. I never did know how. My crew teased me about that. They said, why in the world did he pick you? You're the sorriest radio operator in the whole crowd. I said, well, I figured he chose me because I was the best. I don't know. I think my pilot recommended me. And so I got ahead of my crew. We were supposed to do 35 missions before we could go home. And I did 31, and my crew did 25 when the war ended. First mission we went on was in a place called Brux, B-R-U-X, Czechoslovakia. It's called the Czech Republic now, but it's Czechoslovakia then. And they had all kinds of factories and oil refineries and manufacturing parts for planes, and this was a ball bearing factory. When I heard we were going to build a ball bearing factory, I said, my goodness, ball bearings are in toys. I never thought about them being in tanks and in planes and trucks and all this kind of thing. So ball bearings were very important to the military to keep it moving. But the first mission, we had a lot of planes in the formation. I guess at least 100 planes. First thing I saw when we got into combat, got into enemy territory, and the ground fire called Flak was shooting up at us, and the enemy planes were coming. Of course, the fighter planes took care of them. I didn't get many shots at fighter planes myself. But the first thing I saw that disturbed me was a plane in front of us, flying up in front of us in formation. Apparently was hit directly by a flak shell, and it just exploded, just a big cloud of smoke and fire, and no parachutes or anything coming out. And that made me realize how serious that was, and that it could happen to us any time. So I said, man, we'll never get away. I'll never get home. But worked out that I did, thank goodness. We were on radio silence during combat when we were in enemy territory. I did transmit before we got into enemy territory, keeping in touch with the base. And then when we were coming back home, they were anxious to hear from us after the raid, to know that we were safe and we were on the way. If we had trouble, we reported that. If engines were out, we reported that, or whatever. That part was something that just had to be done, and people were taking down notes from different planes. And I had a frequency to work on and a station to call. Somebody else had a different one, so there were, on the ground back at the home base, there were people listening to different planes coming in. And if it didn't get a rise out of it, they would assume that they had been shot down or were not able to return the message. So I was fortunate and able to report every time we got back into safe territory that we were on the way home. Sometimes we were shot up with flak and had some engines out, or some engines giving us trouble, or we had an oil leak, or we were spilling some fuel. There were holes in the plane. They were trying to keep up with us on the ground, and I was a radio operator trying to keep them informed properly and not say anything that I shouldn't say to give away any secrets, but to let them know the facts as to our well-being. And they'd always want to know, how about the other plane in formation next to you? How was he doing?
And what would you do as a radio operator while the plane was in combat?
I was at a gun. I had a gun at the back, the midpoint of the plane behind the bomb bay was open area, and there was a window on each side, and there were guns out that. It was also where the ball turret gunner under the plane entered his, and also the tail gunner had to get his rear turret back there. Then there was a bomb bay in front of that, and you had to walk a little catwalk to get through there, which I had to do every mission. I had to be at the radio after we took off, and then at enemy territory, I'd walk back that little track through the bombs on each side to get to the guns. And I didn't operate the radio when we were in enemy territory with radio sounds. The pilot would communicate with other planes, and he could communicate with the home base too, but that was left mainly to the radio operator.